Hey, y'all. Welcome to the Radiance Effect podcast, where the goal is to help you shine from the inside out. I'm your host, Brittany Janelle. Let's get into it. And by the way, this is episode number 2 of the podcast, and I'm so geeked. I'm so excited. And I'm even more excited to talk to y'all about today's title and theme. Because let me tell y'all, I was sleeping. And I woke up in the middle of my sleep and began writing as this topic was given to me. Today's theme and title of this episode is called Obey, Trust, Move. Now, let me ask y'all something, okay? When you hear the phrase move in silence, what do you think of? Whenever I've heard that phrase in the past, I often thought of, maybe not announcing my next moves right away, being a little private. And some people may take it up a notch and be so private that you have no idea what's going on with them, right? Some people may be private to only announce what's going on maybe at the start or the completion of the next new thing. And lately, I've been seeing this more and more consistently of people popping up engaged or married, and you didn't even know that they're in a relationship or having a baby, and you had no clue that they were pregnant. But then I had a new perspective, or maybe a dream, because that's where it popped up at. That what if the phrase move in silence meant two additional things? To number 1, move when you can't hear or receive the applause of others. And 2, to move when you can't hear God. One thing that you've probably heard me reference is how I was a people pleaser, right? And transparently, it's probably something I'll keep talking about, right? It's so important to me because as I speak to many people, I realize it's not just something that I struggle with and at times still struggle with. It's something that many people try to work through and they don't even know that they are one, right? Because for me, honestly, it wasn't until I went through my healing journey that I actually realized that I truly had a lot of those characteristics. And when I think about the true definition of a people pleaser, according to Merriam-Webster, it's a person who has an emotional need to please others, often at the expense of his or her own desires and needs. And to me, as I began thinking about my own self, right, and what some of those traits look like for me, I thought of a few different things I wanted to share. Number 1, is having a hard time saying no to others. And I really want you to think about this and reflect on yourself, right? Like if you're that yes person, right? It's one thing when it comes to being a dependable person, that's an amazing trait. But if you're that person who will always say yes, even if it's putting you at a deficit, right? That's what I'm referring to. Number 2 is being afraid of conflict. And I also was that person, right? Because I would be the person who would try to avoid sometimes even speaking my mind because I'm like, you know what? I just don't want no problems. I don't want to argue. I don't want to go through this, right? And it became more consistent until I had to learn to use my voice. Number 3 is always seeking approval and validation from others. And when I mention that, I'm saying, are you someone that has to always go get your friends' approval before you make a decision? And there's nothing wrong with seeking counsel, especially if it's something that you're unsure about. But what I'm referring to here is, are you always going and asking for approval? Or are you learning to think for yourself or to use discernment and ask God? Number 4 is over apologizing to people. So if you think about that, right? Like, are you someone that will always apologize even if you're not wrong? Number 5 is neglecting your own needs out of fear of disappointing others. Or agreeing with something you strongly oppose to just to avoid disapproval. So as I was doing a lot of thinking, right, I was like, where does that come from? And listen, y'all, I'm no therapist. I just want to put that disclaimer out there. I'm just someone that's speaking from my heart, right? And as I thought about that, I was like, for me, it came from my own experiences and past trauma. And I've realized that sometimes the way that we show up is influenced by what we've experienced and what we've seen in others. Maybe we think that the version of ourselves will lead us to success or acceptance. And there's truly so many layers to that, right? And when I reflect on the traits that I mentioned earlier, the one that I resonate with the most is point number 3, which was seeking the approval and validation from others. That one has lingered with me the longest. And what's wild is when you slow down and really pay attention, you notice how the need for validation shows up even in the smallest ways, right? Maybe you posted a cute picture on the gram and people didn't like your post, right? Maybe you did something that you thought would show a certain response and that didn't happen, right? It's the smallest things that can cause you to want that type of validation. And for me, I experienced this most recently when I announced the release of my podcast, y'all. I was so in my head after recording my first episode. I was thinking like my voice sounded shaky. I questioned whether my points were solid enough. And even watching the video and the reels, I caught myself thinking, you know what, girl, you look so bloated. And I was like, but I've been working out. What the people gonna say? You know, they say the camera adds weight. I was all in my head. And if I'm being honest though, I realized that a lot of that was tied to my need for validation. I was subconsciously waiting for people to say, girl, you look good. You sound great. So that I could give myself the permission to proceed. But you know what? When I thought deeper into that, I realized that I'm not moving from a place of confidence or calling when I do that. I'm moving based on the approval of others instead of being obedient to God. And that was the first thing that I needed to correct. And I personally believe that we live in a society today where many people feel the need to hide who they truly are, that they're afraid to take action or be held accountable, fearing that their flaws might be exposed. And that's why I've become so empowered in sharing and being open, because something that I've learned is that growth often happens through exposure, exposing your insecurities, your doubts, and everything you'd rather keep hidden. And trust me, y'all, I'm not saying y'all need to just go out here telling all your business, right? There's some things you need to keep to yourself, and we also going to be talking about discernment later on. But what I am saying is that when you're vulnerable and when you bring certain things to light, you create a space for growth to allow yourself to show up more authentically and to encourage others to do the same. Now, when I go back to the phrase I mentioned earlier of what does moving in silence mean to you, right? And my second point of moving when you can't hear God. As I've evolved and grown as a person, I've realized that it's been the stillness and the surrender that I began to hear from him more clearly. And I grew up as a PK, y'all. That's a preacher's kid, if you don't know what that means. My dad's a minister, and many of my aunts and uncles are ministers. I grew up in church all my life. But honestly, it wasn't until life was lifing and I welcomed God into my life for myself that I truly established a relationship with him and could hear his voice more clearly. It's easy to question his presence, especially when life get hard, right? I know I did. And I used to truly think, God, if you're really here, why are you allowing me to experience this pain? Why do I feel so alone? Why can't I hear you? And you know what, y'all? That's a whole conversation in itself. But then I had this analogy. When you're feeling unwell, mentally, physically, or emotionally, you'll usually seek help. Maybe from a physician, maybe from a therapist, maybe from a friend, and the list goes on. Often, our bodies gives us warning signs, nudging us to pay attention and to go get checked out. The issue is we sometimes prolong the healing. And y'all, I gotta say it one more time. Sometimes we prolong the healing. And that's a whole word in itself. We put it off. We avoid it, or we convince ourselves that we're fine when we're really not. But you know what? Healing often doesn't begin until we choose to get the help that we need. The same is true with God. When we finally decide to go to him, to truly seek his help, that's when we begin to navigate life differently. That's when clarity, peace, and even healing starts to come. So what did that look like for me? It meant that even in my darkest moments, in the silence and the loneliness, I eventually came to realize that I wasn't alone. And I got there by spending intentional time with God, by praying, by reading the word, and by showing up even when it was hard. And over time, my perspective truly shifted. I began to understand that the purpose of pain isn't always to harm you, even though sometimes that thing will hurt, right? But sometimes it's meant to shape you, to grow you, to redirect you, and to bring you back to the one who heals. I've been doing so much reflecting on lately this year, over the last couple years, and that's something I'll keep mentioning, right? Because it's truly helped to birth this version of myself. And as I've done reflecting, something powerful landed with me. Y'all don't know this, right? And I'm so excited to be able to share this portion of my journey with you. But 2.5 years ago, I was a completely different person. When I say I don't look like what I've been through, that is an understatement. I was depressed but smiling through the pain. I was full of anxiety. I was insecure. I was broken. But I knew that God kept giving me visions for a reason. And that maybe, just maybe, I could make it through what I was going through. That the visions that I had of being healed, happy, and whole was not just an illusion, but a peek into my future. That when God showed me visions of speaking to women and sharing my story, that it would come to pass. And that when I read Romans 8:8, which is one of my favorite scriptures now, that it truly meant that no matter how challenging my circumstances were, that all things will work together for my good. Now today, I speak from the standpoint of a woman who has gone through some things, who has felt defeated, who experienced challenges, who thought, why me, God? Many times. And I feel like that's so easy to do when life just hits, right? When the storms are so heavy and you're trying to find a way to maneuver through. It's so easy to say, why me, God? But to take it a step further, I want to say, why not you? Over the last few years, I've learned that our stories have purpose and are so powerful. I heard Fantasia say something along the lines of, you can't have a testimony without being tested. So throughout your journey, I want you to remain confident and remain empowered and knowing that all things are working for your good. And if I was to expand on what I mentioned about why not you, I'd say, why not you, the overcomer? Why not you, be the believer? Why not you, be the compassionate person? Why not you, be the innovator? Why not you, be the person that shines your light despite your circumstances? Why not you? And to get there, the first start is to obey, trust, and move. Like how I tied that in at the end? I'm so silly. But I just want to take the time to say how appreciative I am for every person who has taken their time to listen to this podcast, right? As I'm open and vulnerable with you, I truly appreciate it. And I pray that this message landed with you in a positive way. To stay connected, be sure to follow the show on your platform of choice. We on Apple Podcasts, y'all, Spotify, and YouTube. New episodes will air every first and third Monday at 7 p.m. Until next time, bye.